is Handsome Nerd ASMR, back with another video. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Neisseria gonorrhoeae, as I promised in my last video. And this particular bacteria is also problematic, like the Neisseria meningitis. To better understand the principles associated with this bacteria, we'll use a sketchy image titled "The Violinist's Last Clap." And here is the image provided by Sketchy for your reference. So, let's get started. Again, the Neisseria gonorrhoeae, it's also a gram-negative bacteria. It is a kidney bean-shaped diplococci. It is also oxidase positive, and it will grow on the chocolate agar. However, unlike the Neisseria meningitis, the Neisseria gonorrhoeae does not have a capsule. To remember this, think about the glass capsule case that is broken on the floor. So let's look for that glass capsule case. It seems to be this one, and it looks broken and it's on the floor. So that helps you to remember the fact that the Neisseria gonorrhoeae does not have a capsule. Now for the reservoir, it is found in the human genital tract, and then for transmission, it can occur through sexual contact, birth, and it is also sensitive to drying and cold. So to remember that the bacteria can be transmitted sexually or through sexual contact, just think about the detective flirting with the woman at the bar, as shown over here. And then to remember that this bacteria can be transmitted through birth, think about the mother holding the baby, as shown over here. And again, remember that it is sensitive to drying and cold. So for pathogenesis, the pili of this bacteria allows for the attachment to mucosal surfaces. It will inhibit the phagocytic uptake, and the pili has antigenic variation. The bacteria also has the outer membrane proteins. So the outer membrane protein 1, it's a structural antigen that is used in serotyping. And then the outer membrane also has the opacity-associated proteins, or OPA proteins, that have antigenic variation. And remember, antigenic means something that induces immune response. But anyways, the opacity-associated proteins are not only antigenic and variable, but they also allow for adherence of the bacteria to the mucosal surfaces or to other surfaces. And then, of course, the bacteria has the immunoglobulin A protease, and this will ultimately allow the Neisseria gonorrhoeae to invade mucosal surfaces and cause inflammation. So remember these key structures of the bacteria: the pili, the outer membrane protein 1, and the opacity-associated proteins, along with the IgA protease. Now for the disease, obviously it's going to cause the gonorrhea, and in males, the gonorrhea can present as the urethritis, proctitis, or orchitis. The urethritis simply structures within the pelvis in the females can be inflamed, like the ovaries and the uterus in particular. And then this is going to cause purulent discharge. And so the way to remember this is to think about the candles dripping hot wax onto the table, as shown over here. So here's the hot wax dripping over to the table over here. It does look like a purulent discharge that would come out from the vagina. And then the infection can also spread to the peritoneum. And this is interesting because once it spreads to the peritoneum, it can lead to this thing called the Fitzhugh-Curtis syndrome. And so the Fitzhugh-Curtis syndrome can cause a long, thin, quote, violent string adhesions to the capsule of the liver. And the way to remember this syndrome and the violent string adhesions to the liver capsule is to think about the Fitzhugh-Curtis string orchestral band with the violinist violin in the foreground. I should have said violinist, not violist. Anyways, here's the Fitzhugh-Curtis band. And in the background it says that there should be a violin in the background somewhere. I don't see it from here, but just at least, oh yeah, here it is. There should be a violin in the background right over here. So that helps you remember the violin string adhesions to the liver capsule, and also how that is one of the main findings in the Fitzhugh-Curtis syndrome. And again, this is due to the spread of the infection by the gonorrhoeae to the peritoneum. In addition, females infected with the Neisseria gonorrhoeae can also have asymmetrical arthritis and proctitis. So to remember the asymmetrical arthritis, think about the statue that is crushing the violinist, and there's a crack in one knee. So here's a statue that happened to crush the violinist, and there's one knee of the statue that is cracked, and that is supposed to symbolize the asymmetrical arthritis. And then for infants, they can have ophthalmia, or the inflammation of the eye, and conjunctivitis that rapidly leads to blindness if untreated. So you can remember this by thinking of the mother holding the baby while covering the baby's eyes. So here's a mother with her baby, and she is obviously covering the baby's eyes, and that is supposed to represent the rapid blindness that can occur if the infant is not treated for the Neisseria gonorrhoeae. And remember that ophthalmia and conjunctivitis are the two key findings associated with infant infection for Neisseria gonorrhoeae. And then for diagnosis, you typically find the intracellular gram-negative diplococci in the polymorphonuclear leukocytes from the urethral smear from symptomatic male, and this can be suggestive of infection. And the way to remember the intracellular gram-negative diplococci and polymorphonuclear leukocytes, think about the white chairs in the foreground shaped as neutrophils with is also important to test for chlamydia trachomatis and assume that co-infection is taking place. And then another alternative is to treat with doxycycline. So to remember the co-infection with chlamydia trachomatis, think about the clam-shaped napkins on the table, as shown over here. Clam symbolizing clam media. And then, besides using doxycycline, another thing to remember is that the penicillin binding protein mutations have led to gradual increases in penicillin resistance, particularly in the 1950s through the 1970s. And furthermore, plasmid-mediated beta-lactamase produces a high level of penicillin resistance.